What's up, everybody? We had an eventful day of trial in the Karen Read trial where we had some bombshell admissions made about harassment that came in when the judge surprisingly said the door was open, then potentially some Freudian slips we'll see if the defense highlights later, and also, of course, a mention of a federal investigation. We'll talk about what doors were open, what we can expect the lawyers to argue in the future, and what we expect them not to be able to, depending on what the judge allows. Of course, we'll get to your questions. Make sure you guys hit that like button and subscribe to our page. Let's jump into it. All right, so we have so much to talk about from court today. I want to focus on a few things, okay? I want to focus on some things that came out that may not be admissible outside of the door being opened. We're going to talk about whether or not they can continue to argue that and why not, maybe, depending on the rules of evidence and how trials are allowed to work. But we're also going to talk about how we deal with the reliability of evidence, okay? And I think this trial has highlighted something that's going to be coming a lot in the future when it comes to the ability to edit things on the fly, to make things look very legitimate, to make legitimate things look illegitimate with some of your arguments and how things change and how data gets stored and carries over and what it'll look like all these years later. I think that was highlighted today. And I don't think that's the end of it. I think we're just going to see more and more people either editing things or arguing their editing if it doesn't go their way. We had it in the same witness and the same sides arguing, well, this must be accurate and this proves my point, but this other thing is not accurate at all. And here are all the reasons why. So we're going to dig into all of that today. But we can't forget how we started the day, which was very weird timing of ending yesterday. We had the redirect of Julie Nagel. And basically the big point to come out of this is the Commonwealth got her to say if she knew it was a body, she'd call 911. And she didn't put two and two together until the next day. And I was going to play this clip, but I'll just summarize it because it'll be quicker. And on recross, which the court did allow, he basically asked one question. You said you'd call 911 if you figured out it was a body that night, right? Yeah, but you didn't know it was a body. Sure. You found out the next day it was a body, right? And you still didn't call 911 the next day, and you never told them until months and months and months later. And throughout the entirety of this case, the defense has been pushing that so much of this evidence didn't come forward until they pushed, until they forced the hand and brought out details that nobody admitted before and other people were trying to quote unquote hide. Now, is that what came back to bite them later? We'll discuss it as a potential reason the door was open, because I want to get your take and I want to explain to you kind of legally how we look at doors being open to certain evidence. So then we took a witness out of turn. Thank God. It was a nice breath of fresh air to have a forensic scientist, an expert, a DNA expert come and testify. And I was like, wow, I never thought I would think that was a nice breakup I needed in trial, was for some forensic scientist to come and tell me that there was no canine DNA in any of the samples they got. There was pig DNA, and we have no clue why. So once again, kind of explaining how something is important, but also not important at the same time. And on cross, the most obvious argument, I heard some people saying this was huge evidence for the Commonwealth. And I was like, listen, and I said this from the jump and I did not know this was coming, right? So my opinion has not changed on this, but anything, and I mean anything the Commonwealth tries to use, anything that was gathered at the scene scientifically, I'm pretty much throwing it out if I'm a juror. So if we're talking red Solo cups and Stop and Shop bags and not sealed containers, it's out. And this was very well done on cross. And frankly, sometimes as I'm watching this trial, honestly, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys disagree with me. By the way, I went on NBC 10, Boston 10, whatever it's called. And I said that finally the Commonwealth connected a dot, at least had somebody say they saw something in the yard. And holy cow, you would have thought I said Karen Read's guilty. She did it. So I get the backlash people are feeling in this case, but whatever. In 3 minutes, I'm talking about this with people. I'm talking about stuff off air with them and then on air. You want the full story, come get the breakdowns here for an hour. I try to fit it all into an hour. But I will just tell you that giving all of the ifs, buts, and problems takes longer than 3 minutes. And there were plenty of problems with Nagel's testimony, just like there were plenty of problems with this DNA expert. Poor thing. She did her job. She came and testified. No canine DNA. Yes, there was pig DNA. Didn't really know why. But, sorry, I interrupted my own point. My point was, sometimes I wish, as I'm watching this trial, that the defense did not have this alternate theory. And I don't mean I wish they didn't have an alternate theory. I mean, if this was just a defense to pick apart how horrible this investigation was, and how even all the stuff with the Alberts and the conflicts and all that just comes back to a dirty investigation that we really shouldn't trust, and this isn't how it should be done in the United States of America, I think this defense would be an A+. The only reason I think it's not an A+ at this point is because there are some issues with the theory they're throwing out, right? There are some issues, and we've talked about them throughout the breakdowns, and we'll continue to talk about them today. So when we talk about how great of a defense it is to argue that this investigation is so piss poor, is to just have a nice and perfect contrast to how things are supposed to be done by professionals. And when the Commonwealth put this witness on the stand and the defense got to cross her and talk about her perfect logs that she keeps, when somebody touches something or somebody opens something, or do you use anything that's not sterile? Do you use any cups? She's like, I'm not sure what you mean. Everything that we use to put this stuff in is sterile. I mean, every protocol, every standard operating procedure that these people had with the DNA testing, the state police failed. So I'm not so sure how this was really that good for the Commonwealth, except for the fact that, and I don't know, what is that supposed to prove? That a dog didn't do anything because of that horrible, contaminated, quote unquote, evidence that they have didn't come up with all of the, and the defense even got him to say that it didn't connect canine DNA, or sorry, detect canine DNA. Nothing burger to me, but it was kind of nice to hear a different kind of evidence and not more about the same stuff about who was at the Alberts house when and who left, and et cetera, et cetera. Then we have Ryan Nagel, who was in the truck that came to pick up his sister, talked about where they all went that night, 5 to 8 beers, normal for a weekend. And for the first time, we see somebody before being at the house seeing a dark SUV. So they get to a turn. His buddy that's driving the car flashes the lights so the dark SUV can go first. They both end up at 34 Fairview. The dark SUV parks in front of them at 34 Fairview, and they park behind them. It moves at some point while they're there, and his sister talks to them for a couple of minutes while they were there. And we're going to listen to part of this testimony. Problem is, Ryan Nagel has some differences in his testimony than basically everybody else that night, like where the dark SUV was, whether or not it moved, things like that. How important they are, I don't know, but they are inconsistent to a point. But let's see what he observed, because it's also kind of a first, which I like in this trial when the Commonwealth is actually bringing new information to the table. And let's listen to what he saw and what he heard while he was at 34 Fairview.
Sort of the distance between the truck that you're in and the SUV that's in front of you. Did Ricky put it in reverse and then have to like maneuver around, or could he just sort of pull away from the curb?
He just pulled away.
And as he's going by the dark SUV, what, if anything, did you observe with reference to that?
I observed that there was a person inside the car with the interior light on.
And that would be sort of a dome light, is that right?
Correct, sir, yes.
So you see where the dome light was, as far as in the left, right, or center of the vehicle?
I was in the center.
And can you describe the person that you saw? Where were they? First of all, where were they in the car?
They were in the driver's seat.
And can you describe what the person looked like?
It was a woman.
And how do you know that it was a woman?
Had long hair.
And do you know what color the hair was?
No, I didn't. Wasn't really paying attention to it. I was kind of just watching Julie go in as we were pulling away.
My favorite is when some of these witnesses say, I wasn't really paying attention, even though they know all these details. But then when they don't know, it's like, well, what did you expect? I was talking to my sister and whatever. But they have certain details so perfectly. That happens in every trial. People are nitpicking it in this trial more. I get it. They're more passionate about it. They're more invested in it. But overall, that happens in every trial where they remember certain things and not others.
Directions to the house as you're walking, Julie go in and Ricky's pulling away sort of simultaneously?
Yes, sir.
So that's why you're looking over in that area of the house?
Correct.
And the woman that you see in the driver's seat of the vehicle, could you see her lips moving as if she was talking or anything like that?
No, I wasn't really paying attention to that.
And as far as what, if anything, did you observe her to doing, or how would she see it?
It seemed like she was looking straight ahead with her hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel.
Now, as far as the other, what, if anything else, did you see, or who, if anyone else, did you see within the interior?
I mean, some of these questions are brutal. It's like, Well, who else? What else? What if anything? What if anything did you see? So far, we did get somebody who finally didn't just see a dark SUV, but they put a female driver behind the dark SUV, connecting dots. Finally, this is what evidence is supposed to sound like. Whether or not it's reliable, we can argue about that, right? Whether or not we think he's lying, fine, whatever. If the jury thinks that, but like to this point, I feel like most of the Commonwealth witnesses haven't even said things that are good for them. So at least they're starting to get some witnesses to develop some testimony where around after 12 o'clock, right? After 12:10, technically, they're all pretty, make sure they say that. After 12:10, they see a female driving the dark SUV, parking in front of 34 Fairview Road. Now, they don't see a male in the front seat, which is a problem for the Commonwealth's theory. But at least we have that. We have some people connecting that. And just wait, there's more details coming later, but he's giving them something here.
I only saw one person at the time. Wasn't really looking. It just happened to be like at a glance as we drove by.
And so your head's already turned in that direction, looking to see your sister get inside the house, correct?
Correct, sir, yes.
And so as you're going by and you make these observations of this woman in the front seat of the vehicle, what, if any, movement did you do of your body or your head to look into this?
I just turned my head as we were driving by to watch Julie go in and turn straight, look forward.
So it's not as if you were peeking forward or going back to get a better view inside the vehicle?
No, sir.
Yeah, so like I'm for sure it was a woman, but I didn't get any other details, and I'm not really sure what else I did or didn't see. And that's kind of tough when you have a witness because you want him to confirm, was there only one person? Was there two? What did you see? What did you didn't? And basically he confirmed female driver. That's it. Can't confirm or deny if anybody else was in the car at this point.
Now, during the time that you were outside the house, did you hear any noises or hear anything coming from that vehicle in front of you?
No, sir, I did not.
And as far as with
Did you hear any noises or see anything from that vehicle in front of you? And this is where I start to go like, huh. And I tweeted this. I was like, are they trying to say that O'Keefe was hit by Karen Reed while the Nagels are having this conversation in the driveway? That can't be it. And I'm thinking maybe that is it. But then also they seem to try to fight another defense theory instead of trying to prove theirs, which has been one of my other beefs with the Commonwealth throughout this case. Is they're focusing so much on the defense's theory as opposed to proving their own.
in your own vehicle, when Julie comes out, what, if anything, did you or Ricky do with regard to sort of radio with him?
Turn the music down. We had music playing.
Yeah, music playing, and pull up, turn it down when Julie comes out to talk.
Correct, sir, yes.
And at the time that you're pulling away from the curb, had you or anybody sort of turned the radio back up?
Not that I remember, sir, no.
Now, with reference to when Julie comes out and you open the doors so that you can talk to her, is that correct?
Yes, sir, yes.
And did you open just the front passenger door or the back door?
I opened my passenger door, that was it.
And you were expecting her to essentially get in at that point, is that correct?
Correct, sir, yes, I was.
Now, when you opened the door to the pickup truck, the passenger side door, what, if anything, happened with the dome light inside the truck?
I went on.
So the dome light is the interior light inside the truck. It was on, which is how he can confirm it was a female driver, right? And multiple witnesses confirm that very same thing. Then we get to cross, or he points out, where in the pictures on the house the car was parked to confirm the location of where the car was parked at 34 Fairview. On cross, he hadn't been contacted by anyone from the Albert or McCabe family, so they're not kind of trying to get to him. That's good for the Commonwealth. Also on cross, he did talk to Ricky, who's his buddy and was the driver that night. The girl that was in the car was his girlfriend, not his girlfriend anymore. He was interviewed on February 7th, and I was like, oh, good. Somebody finally that was interviewed right then and there. Very weird that the other people in the car weren't, and a major red flag, but at least he was. And he told them who the other two people in the car were, but we'll find out later they did not get interviewed. Then we start to talk a little bit about these interviews, which is when our first kind of bombshell of the day goes off.
SUV was closer.
Correct, sir.
And I'm going to slow it down because honestly, I had to back it up when I first heard it, and I wasn't sure if this is what he said.
You pulled up to Fairview and stopped relatively close to the driveway, as you've indicated to the jury, correct?
Correct, sir.
And your car was as much as 3 car lengths behind that SUV. Do you recall that?
When we arrived,
Yes.
I would say car length and a half at the time.
Okay. Do you recall being interviewed on or about May 11th, 2023 by individuals not associated with the Commonwealth?
And just to point out, because we're going to discuss this in detail, that is the same exact question the defense has basically been asking everybody. The same exact verbiage, right? So nothing changed. They didn't dig any further. Same question, which is important when we talk about opening the door.
A gentleman came to my door, but I did not speak to him.
Would it refresh your recollection? Do you remember talking in May of 2023 with anybody about this case?
I don't know, 2023 may have been the feds.
Okay.
I mean, that's as clear as day. 2023 may have been the feds. Let's finish just this line of questioning. It's about another 30 seconds, and then we'll discuss.
I'm trying to.
Just listen to my question.
No, I understand.
Were you talked to by anybody? Don't say who. Just tell me if you were talking, yes or no.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Do you think it would refresh your recollection as to when that interview took place if you saw a report?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
All right. So the lawyer, Jackson, there was not only not trying to get into the feds, he was trying to ask his question as specifically as possible. Did anybody talk to you? And that's why the question, did anybody talk to you, is a yes or no question. Who talked to you is give me a name or the feds. So Jackson and the defense lawyers have been trying to just get people to say, not Commonwealth, not defense. You were interviewed by somebody else, right? Not who is that somebody else, but you were interviewed by somebody else. So let's get into whether or not this federal investigation is going to be discussed now, like Timar and a bunch of people have been asking me. Okay. They're like, yes, we can get into this. Jury for sure knows that there's a federal investigation now. I'm not so sure. I know reports of the courtroom are people think the jury knows. I have no idea. It's hard to get inside a juror's head. I almost missed the comment if I didn't go back and listen to it again, if I'm being honest. And I already know about the federal investigation. So if you just kind of heard that, I also think some people would think like feds, state police, Proctor, what's the big difference? I don't know that there would be a big difference. Okay. My third thought on federal investigation. The general public thinks that federal investigation, myself included, is a good thing for Karen Reed and a bad thing for the Commonwealth, right? I think that's the general consensus on this federal investigation. However, we've had other cases like Alec Murdoch or Chauvin or Arbery, Ahmaud Arbery's defendants, where there were state and federal criminal cases against the defendant. So if a juror hears this, is it automatically good for the defense if they don't know all the other circumstances? I don't know. Or do they think there's a federal charge that Karen Reed has as well? And are they thinking, oh, this must be really bad if the feds are also investigating Karen Reed? So I think it could actually cut bad for Karen Reed, which is why if I was the defense, maybe I would push for some clarification from the judge. So let's talk about what they can do from here on out. If something happens like this, and you as the defense, let's just say the judge obviously thinks the federal investigation is good for the defense, you can't use it as a sword and shield. You can't open the door yourself. You can't ask a question that's going to elicit an answer that's going to open the door to something that's inadmissible that you wanted to get in the first place. So they can't open their own door and walk through. Number one. Number two, so what do you do with it now that it's out? There's basically three options. Option number one is you do nothing. You hope the jury doesn't put any stake in it. They just kind of either missed it or don't make it a big deal, and you move on and you keep going. Option number two, the judge gives a clarifying instruction, like I mentioned before. You guys may have heard him say feds, disregard that. It has nothing to do with this case. It's not relevant to this case at all, and just listen to the rest of the evidence, but that's not something you should consider. Now, if you do it innocuously enough, then sometimes it can be fine and it's no big deal and the jurors don't think about it and they just move on. Sometimes it can highlight it a little too much. Now, the third thing you can do is it just becomes in evidence and part of the trial and everybody can argue it. Highly doubt the judge is going to do that. And what I would say is, even though somebody mentioned this, if I was the judge and I didn't want that to come in, I would tell the lawyers, hey, I know that word came out. Do not argue it in closing. Do not bring it up again. Do not ask any other witnesses. I know you guys have feelings about whether it should come in or not and about this judge. I've had cases where insurance comes up inadvertently or other things that are inadmissible in different trials. And if it slips out, you either give a curative instruction or the judge says, you're not going to argue that. That's not admissible. It's not okay. It came up during your cross. I know you didn't do it on purpose, but it did come up during your cross. You're not going to use that. So that's what I expect to happen with this whole federal investigation discussion because it's been dropped here. All right. I wanted to dig into that, so I'm glad we got a chance to do that. There might be more. Let me hit a couple more questions. Tree Loper, is it realistic to think that the jurors are not aware of the harassment in this small community? I think that's something that was probably asked about in voir dire. Russ, Peter, at the end of each daily breakdown, can we get your opinion on who you think won the day, defense or prosecution? Sure, I think that's fine. I just don't want to confuse that with who's winning the trial or as if the trial is over, right? Because I've had cases where it didn't go my way, or at least as big of a verdict as I wanted, that we thought we crushed them. Other cases I was nervous about that end up with huge verdicts, whatever it may be. So just because a lawyer or a side wins the day doesn't mean they won the case. With that caveat, sure, we can do that some. If I remember, sometimes I forget by the end. Knee and match. Does everybody agree it just began snowing about 12 a.m.? Breezy, Peter, I just said this in the chat. I wish they didn't have the cover-up theory. I'm fearful the jury will pick the prosecution's theory if the defense doesn't add up. The poor investigation was enough. Because so what can happen in this, and the fear in this is if you bring this alternate theory, now they're saying which one is more likely, which is not the standard. And if they're like, I don't know, the defense's theory really doesn't seem real, let's just go with the prosecution, as opposed to, did the prosecution prove this beyond a reasonable doubt with this shoddy investigation? So it can kind of change the burden sometimes. Melissa, I heard another lawyer call Lally's objections ouch objections, meaning the objections, he objects because he doesn't like what he hears, but that these objections just draw attention to the facts. Your thoughts? I think he's winning a lot of objections, so it's hard for me to think he's, like really screwing up the objection front, because again, he's winning a lot. You can say that's because of the judge or whatever. I think he's had some legitimate arguments with objections, especially on some of the pretrial rulings. Some of them are ouch objections, and some of them I'm like, why are you even objecting to that? I thought that was going to be good for you. But I wouldn't say they're all ouch objections. Sure, some of them are. James, Peter, do you think that Julie Nagel is credible? I feel like the prosecution's case is relying on her testimony at this point. I don't know if I'd say it's relying on her. It's definitely a big part. I think she kind of cut her own credibility admitting she was drunk. But I do think at this point, the jury's just hungry for somebody to give them something they can hang on to. So I think they're going to at least consider at this point. I don't think they've thrown it out at this point, but I don't think they're like, absolutely what she says is gospel. I don't think they've quite gotten there. All right. I got to get back to the testimony here. We got so much to get through. Spoke to Julie for over 5 minutes. The truck is lifted. He opened the door. It could obstruct the view. And then he gets to what he actually saw about the SUV in front of him.
Is focused on your sister, obviously.
Yes.
At some point, she did decide to stay.
Yep.
And at that point, she then left the crook of the door. You would shut the door. I'm guessing you shut the door.
Yes, sir.
And then Ricky figured out, okay, we're gonna get out of here, and she's not coming with us.
Correct.
Did y'all wait long enough to see her go inside the house?
Just gradually pulling away and watch her walk in the house.
Okay. And that answers my next question. When you pulled away, you didn't speed away, correct?
Correct, sir.
Gradually, slowly pulled away and out and around the SUV that was in front of you.
Correct, sir. Yes.
So y'all made up the distance at that point, after you had this maybe 5-minute conversation with your sister, made up the distance and got up to the SUV that was in front.
Yes.
All her taillights, all the taillights were intact.
To my acknowledgement, yes.
I mean, as you sit
I
here,
mean, like, man,
of course.
I mean, I'm not there to, look at a car and be like, oh, is there any damage on a vehicle? It's 12:30 at night. Obviously, I had a few drinks. I'm up looking for that. I just noticed that the brake lights were on. So.
Right. But the point is, as you sat there and you testified about this before, you noticed no damage on any of the taillights.
Not to my acknowledgement, no.
Okay. There's 3 taillights, one to the left, one to the right, and one center top.
Correct, sir.
You didn't note anything out of the ordinary with regard to the rear of that truck.
No, like I said, it was dark out.
At any point, did you see that SUV in front of you drive up 50 or 60 feet, slam into reverse, and then drive backward?
No.
At any point, did you see that SUV reverse and hit a pedestrian?
Objection, sir.
I'll allow that. You didn't see that, right?
No.
So I heard a couple issues with what the judge said here. I heard people saying she sustained that objection. She didn't. She said she'll allow it. And then I heard people saying she directed the witness to say he didn't see that. That's not what she did. He said he didn't see it. She confirmed he didn't see it, allowing it to be on the record. It was a totally appropriate question. He was sitting there seeing it. And that's where I'm like, is that the Commonwealth's theory? It can't be the Commonwealth's theory, right? It just can't be. And he even says he didn't see it. So he's sitting there the whole time. He obviously would have seen it. He didn't see it. So that's not when the accident occurred. We know that. We can lock that in. Julie Nagel, if you want to believe her, didn't see it, his body in the yard until an hour and a half later. So we know for a fact that Karen Reed, based on the Commonwealth's witnesses, did not hit John O'Keefe at 12:10 or whatever time, 12:15, whatever time this conversation may have happened. We know that for a fact now from the Commonwealth's own witnesses. So we're going to continue to try to figure out, when and how they prove this happened. Charlie said, Lori, have you ever dealt with a situation where a secondary investigation was happening and you were required to be silent? I would think this is rare. It is very rare. I will say this happened one other time that I can think of in federal court where there was a secondary investigation. And it was so bad that it's a federal judge, so maybe a little bit different. She's not nervous about anything because she is appointed for life. And it was so bad that we lost a trial, won an appeal, And when we were going to try it again the second time, she dismissed all the charges and threw out the indictment against the defendant because of all the screw ups in the investigation. There was one question I was gonna. B&B said, why are we here? I'm not convinced Karen Reed did anything. I am convinced the Alberts McCades are hiding something. The fake tears, also everyone updating their phones. It's all just so bizarre. Anyone else? Am I missing something? So I thought some interesting stuff came out about updating the phone today, and we'll talk about that. Number two, I update my phone every 2 years too. So, I mean, if something happened 2 or 3 years ago, I would have updated my phone as well. Now, would I have if I had evidence of a case? No, of course not, or I would have made sure I saved all that and everything. But I get your point. I get your point.
At no point did you see a person laying on the lawn,
No, but I also wasn't looking.
but you didn't see it.
No.
And you didn't see
Like
the
it could have happened then? So no, I didn't look at somebody on the lawn, but it could have been. It's like, no, dude, no. You would have had to see somebody speeding around, ramming into a guy. You would have had to see that.
in front of you.
The SUV, yes.
The SUV in front of you.
Correct.
All right. You didn't see a person standing or lying on the ground anywhere around that SUV, did you?
No.
And it's not just that you didn't see that SUV hit a pedestrian. That did not happen while you were sitting there, did it?
Objection.
You can go ahead and answer that.
No, I did not.
After you drove away or drove up slowly in order to drive away, you were the passenger, or as you drove away, I should say, you were the passenger closest to the SUV as you would be passing, correct?
Correct, sir, yes.
You looked out the right window of that F-150, correct?
Correct.
And you could actually see inside the SUV as it sat there idling, correct?
Correct.
That's because the dome light was on. Isn't that right?
Correct, sir.
And you noticed that the dome light was on inside because you could clearly see what was happening inside the SUV at that time as you passed by.
And I wasn't directly looking inside. I was making sure my sister got in the house okay.
Right. But you did look inside that SUV
As I passed by, yes.
and you saw one person,
That's all I saw at the time, yes.
female with long hair. Is that right? And you did not see anybody else inside that SUV.
No, not to my acknowledgement.
As a matter of fact, you were asked that in prior testimony and you indicated in response to that basic question, no, she was alone, correct?
Correct, sir.
Yes.
One person in the car. Where's John O'Keefe? And Liz A, I agree. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of inconsistencies throughout these 3 or 4 people that were, here at this time. Marty, my main question so far, if Karen Reed did it, when? I agree. If he did, meaning John O'Keefe go inside the Alberts, why didn't Karen Reed go inside too? If he went inside the Alberts at this point, throw this case out. Like, not guilty. If they're lying about that, just forget it. Forget about it. It's got to be over. But I think the defense's theory is that she dropped him off to go in there and she didn't want to go in. I don't know if there was a fight or what the reason is for that, but we're going to see. Vicky with the Y said, I'm feeling pretty invested in this case and will be devastated with the guilty verdict if a true smoking gun isn't presented. How do criminal defense attorneys handle a loss when they truly believe in their client's innocence? Well, if you go back to Murdoch, which a lot of people think he's guilty as sin and can't understand his lawyers believe he's innocent and they're pretty bummed about it. People are kind of laughing at them, making fun of them, but regardless of what the public thinks, sometimes lawyers have their own opinion based on knowing and talking to the client. It is devastating. There's nothing worse than thinking a man or woman is innocent and then losing. Nothing worse than that. Okay, then we're going to get to Heather Maddox, who is his ex-girlfriend, was also in the truck. Similar event, but some differences in her testimony. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
And the other car's coming the opposite direction. What, if anything, did Ricky do with regard to the lights on the truck that you were in?
The lights on the truck we were in?
Yes.
Well, we let the other car that was coming from the opposite direction, we let them take a right onto the street first. We yielded to them.
And yielded to them as, what, if anything, did Ricky do to signal to that other driver that they could go ahead?
He could have flashed his lights or put his blinker on. I don't recall.
So the reason he's asking is, and this is, again, I don't know why the Commonwealth is doing this. We don't need these details. We don't need to know if he flashed the lights. You're creating inconsistencies. And criminal defense attorneys can say you can find reasonable doubt from the evidence, the lack of evidence, or the conflicts in the evidence. So the fact that one of the witnesses said he flashed his lights, one of the witnesses said, I don't know, he could have put on his blinker flashlights. And then the driver said, no, I didn't do anything. I didn't even see that SUV pull in before me. It's like, what? Why did we go these details? Why didn't you just ask all 3 of them? What I would have done, ask all 3 of them, was the dark SUV there when you got to 34 Fairview? Yes. Okay. Where was it? Okay. And if the defense really wants to pull out that little nuanced difference, fine. Let them pull out that inconsistency. It'll be clunky. It won't come out smoothly. But when you bring it out, I don't get that. I don't get that personally. All right, let's keep listening to her explanation.
From this other vehicle, as far as the interior of the vehicle, as you're yielding to this vehicle taking a right, what, if any, observations did you make of people inside that other vehicle?
I've noticed a male and a female in the car.
And where within the vehicle was the male and female that you observed situated or seated in the car?
The female was driving and the male was in the passenger seat.
All right. A very new and very important detail. Before before the SUV gets to the house and before, what's his name? Male Nagel, Ryan Nagel, sees just a female in the driver's seat, there is a male passenger. She sees him before they pull in. So one of two things had to happen, because as we go, the Commonwealth tries to develop a theory that well, he didn't get out of the car and go inside the house because you would have seen that and you didn't see him get out and go inside the house. No, I didn't. They asked multiple witnesses that as well. And the answer is pretty consistent. No, I didn't get out. Do you think you'd miss a 6 foot, 200-pound man walking inside? No, I don't think I'd miss that. Well, who cares if they missed it or not? The testimony was 2 people in the car, and then when they park, there's 1 person in the car. Now, they try to backtrack a little bit and they try to qualify and say, well, there could have been somebody in the passenger seat, but I didn't see if there was somebody. Positive there was a driver. Light was on inside the car. Not sure if there was anybody in the passenger seat. Again, a 6 foot plus 200+ pound man. Feels wild to me. Feels hard to believe.
And then beyond them being a male or female, what if any other sort of observations did you make of what they look like or anything like that?
No, I didn't make any other observations.
Let me ask it this way. Were they African-American, Caucasian?
Caucasian. Yeah, Caucasian.
So Caucasian female?
Correct.
Caucasian male.
Correct.
And as far as age or anything like that, could you tell anything in regard to that?
Not really, no.
And as far as your sort of differentiation between male versus female, what, if anything, did you observe about them that made you sort of characterize them that way?
Characterize them as a male and female?
Yes.
Long hair and short hair.
So that vehicle pulls onto the street that you're going onto in front of you, correct?
Correct.
And
Men can have long hair too, guys. Men can have long hair too, all right? And women can have short hair.
he then proceeds to make the left-hand turn.
Correct.
Now, as Ricky is driving down the streets to wherever this friend's house is, where does that SUV that you observed making the turn, where does that go?
It was parked on the street outside a house.
And so as far as from the time that you're, sorry, go back. Thank you both. So with regard to from the time that Ricky yields to that car coming in the opposite direction and the time that you pull up to the house, was that SUV in front of Ricky's truck for the entire time?
Yes.
And where did that vehicle go with relation to the house that you eventually stopped?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Did the SUV that was in front of you go to the same house?
Yes.
And when you get to the house, where was it that Ricky parked the truck in relation to the house?
Right outside the house, probably a little past the mailbox, past the driveway.
And when you make that turn from whatever street that is onto the street where the friend's house is, about how long down the street did you go before Ricky pulled over in the area of that mailbox?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
And when Ricky comes to a stop in the area of that mailbox, where is, or can you describe the distance sort of between where you are in Ricky's truck and where the vehicle is in front?
We were parked right behind it, just a couple feet, maybe.
And during the time that you were outside of that friend's house, did that car stay still or move or something?
It just stayed still.
So your memory is that the vehicle was essentially in the same place in front of you the entire
And that's different than Ryan Nagel's representations.
time that you were there?
Correct.
And from that sort of vantage point from behind the vehicle, did you observe any sort of damage or anything to the rear of the vehicle as it was in front of you?
I did not.
And at any point in time, did you see anybody exit from that vehicle at any point?
No.
Did you see anybody exit from that vehicle and go toward the house?
No.
Now, as far as when you were pulling up to the house, what was the weather like at that point, if you recall?
It was snowing out.
And what, if anything, do you recall as far as sort of accumulation of that snow at that time?
It was a light snow, but it was sticking to the ground. It started to stick.
And as far as when you're pulling up behind that vehicle, as far as behind that vehicle, did you observe any sort of marks of snow from that vehicle?
No.
So no tire tracks or anything that you saw?
Well, tire tracks on the road, obviously, but other than that, no.
So tire tracks on the road in behind that vehicle, coming up to the point where it was parked?
Correct.
So again, nothing out of the ordinary, doesn't really match Julie Nagel, I think, her testimony. No surprise there. So there are obviously inconsistencies that the state's going to have to deal with, and we'll kind of see how it goes. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit.
And you were looking this, let me ask you this, as far as when Julie left the truck and went back in the house, was she fully inside the house at the time that the truck was pulling away?
Yes.
And so when the truck is pulling away, where are you facing and sort of what are you looking at as you are passing by the house and passing by the SUV?
I was looking out the passenger side window, so facing the house.
And as you go past the SUV, what, if anything, did you observe within the SUV?
I observed the female in the driver's seat.
And appeared to be the same female that you observed as you were turning onto the road of Julie's friend's house?
Correct.
And what, if anything, did you observe the female in the, where was she in the vehicle?
The driver's side.
So still in the driver's seat as you had observed earlier?
Correct.
And what, if anything else, could you see as far as the driver, as far as what was she doing or anything like that?
I didn't observe anything else. She was just sitting there.
And as far as you were passing, what, if anything, did you note as far as the sort of interior lighting within the vehicle?
Yes, the interior lighting was on. So that's why I had noticed as we were pulling away the female in the driver's seat.
As far as the male passenger that you saw as you were pulling onto the street, could you see him at that point?
I did not see any other person, just the female in the driver's seat.
As you were passing by the
I did not see any other person, just the female in the driver's seat. Now that's about to change, I think, a little bit, but that's what she says at first.
vehicle, did you adjust your, I mean, how intently were you looking inside the seat?
Not very intently, just kind of as we were passing by.
You didn't sort of change your positioning to see better within the vehicle, you didn't lean forward, lean back, or anything like that?
No.
And after you left that house, where did you go from there?
Back to Ryan's.
All right. So she's like, I wasn't really looking that close, so maybe I don't know what I saw. But seems pretty clear so far through two witnesses, only one person in the car. Now, how does this hurt the defense's theory? Okay. Now, I haven't heard anything that hurts the defense's theory that this was a horrible investigation, delayed, potentially biased investigation. That theory has been pretty flawless so far. But their third-party culprit theory of, he must have gotten out of the car and gone inside the house. If the state really wanted to cover that up and law enforcement really wanted to cover that up and all these witnesses were in cahoots, why didn't they say they also saw John O'Keefe in the front seat? I have no idea. Now, maybe these people aren't in on it. I don't know, but I do feel like some of these witnesses could push a little further with some small details that would make the Commonwealth's timeline work a little better, and they don't, which, again, I have no idea what that means. It definitely doesn't mean they're proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt to this point. Shar, how can so much time lapse before investigators actually talk to or interview the witnesses? Wouldn't you want to get details ASAP from the witnesses? Shar, you can't be bringing this type of logic in here. This is far too logical. The first 48, they made a show about it, about how important that is. Absolutely. Like every lay lawyer, law enforcement, I don't care who you are, everybody knows that this comment is true, which is why they didn't do that in this case, and therefore the jury should scrutinize it in a different way, because this is not how it's supposed to be. The Fast and the Curious said, please talk about when the defense asked the expert about the solo cups and her reaction. It was horrible. It was horrible. When there was a juxtaposition made between how she does things in her work and how they did things in this case, and how it's not her fault. Like, she just tests the swabs. And I thought they did a masterful job just taking any bit of good evidence she had and being like, yeah, but it's fruit of the poisonous tree, basically. Garbage in, garbage out, I think they used. Mermaid said, can the defense call the Commonwealth witnesses again when they present their case? Can they call Brian, Colin, Caitlin, Albert again? They're on the defense list too. So yes, as long as they're still subject to the rule of sequestration, usually you'll let the judge know that. You have to call them for a legitimate reason. That's different than the area you covered on cross for them. You can't just do it to harass them. But theoretically, yes, they could still call them. Gina, how is it that witnesses are adamant about some things but can't recall other things? Again, this happens in lots of cases. And the real reason, you want the real behind the scenes, behind the curtain, legitimate, quick and dirty reason, because these statements and these facts that were given in their either initial interview, deposition, first time they talked to it, first time they recited it, they review that, they talk about that, they prep that, they reread prior statements so many times that all of those facts are a lot more burned to their brain than anything that they weren't asked or didn't talk about before. That's the real truth. Because they wouldn't actually remember independently a lot of these details, but because they've reviewed prior statements so much, some of the details obviously stick better than others. All right, now let's get to her cross. First interview wasn't until September of 2023. So how in the world is Ryan's done on February 7th, but hers not done until September of 2023, 18 months later? I wrote, why would they talk to Nagel and not her? I don't get it. Also, she didn't see the Jeep with the snowplow. Multiple people testified to that, which is contradictory to other witness statements, which is just like, what do you believe? Nobody is painting a consistent picture of what was outside 34 Fairview. No matter how many people they called to tell us what they saw, none of it is actually lining up very well. So what do you do with that if you're the jury? If you guys out there, potential jurors, if that's what you've got, what are you doing with that? And then I thought this kind of a funny moment where, good defense attorneys can ask bad questions sometimes. And I thought this was a bad question by Mr. Jackson, but he recovers quickly. But I thought it was interesting, another little light moment in court.
On Julie.
Ultimately, the three of you did pull away from the driveway area where you were parked.
Could you rephrase?
Sure. Ultimately, y'all did move, the truck did move past the house and move past the SUV.
Once we left, yes.
As you drove by the SUV, you noticed that the dome light was on.
Could you explain the dome, what that
Dome
means?
light, the interior light.
Yes,
Dome.
Yes.
Yeah. So you could see it lit up the interior of the car.
correct.
It was a late model SUV, probably a pretty bright light. You could see inside the car.
I could.
You clearly could see, well, you could see a female.
Correct.
By the way, do you recognize the person to my left?
I do, but only because of,
That was a terrible question.
Oopsie. It's like one of the most reported on cases right now. He's like, do you recognize this lady right here next to me? And obviously in the small town, it's been a huge case for years. He's like, do you recognize this lady? And she's like, well, and she's trying to be honest. I kind of think she's very honest. I think she's a pretty credible witness. She just kind of called it like she saw it. It's not her fault she wasn't interviewed until September of 2023. So I do believe that she saw Karen Reed in the driver's seat of the SUV after 12 o'clock next to the lawn in 34 Fairview. That felt like a clue guess. But she's like, yeah, I recognize her, but from, and he's like, I'm sorry, that was a terrible question. And he recovered before she's like, all the media, et cetera, et cetera. But there's more on that later.
Do you recognize her from that night? Is she the person that was in the driver's seat, or do you know?
I don't know.
But the person you did see was a Caucasian female with long hair.
Correct.
As you drove by, the interior light was on well enough that you could see her, but you could see the female clearly.
Correct.
And you could also see that there was no male in the truck as well, correct?
I don't know. The other male that I saw in the SUV before they pulled on to Fairview,
Right.
He could have been in when it was parked, but the only person I saw as we were pulling away was the female driver.
So when you pulled away, you looked to your right as your passenger window.
Mhm. Correct.
The interior dome light was on.
Yes.
And you testified to this before, correct?
Correct.
You've been asked these questions in another proceeding, correct?
Correct.
And you testified the only person you saw in that interior of that car at that time when y'all pulled away was the female.
Okay.
Is that right?
Sure, if I remember correctly.
Okay. That's all I have.
Mr. Lally?
So we're going to listen to this redirect as well. But I did want to put up this question. Peter, all I'm seeing is witnesses saying, yes, Karen was there. We already know this. She dropped him off. This proves nothing for me. So what? So Mama Pinks, here's one of the issues with this statement. I assume you've been following the case. I didn't know when Karen Reed and John O'Keefe arrived. I didn't know that they were going to admit that she was there. I didn't know how they were going to prove this part of the story. So to me, it was important that they had a witness that put Karen Reed behind the wheel of the dark SUV and put her at 34 Fairview after 12 o'clock. Now, I don't get what they're trying to say happened, in the meantime, but that was an important fact to me to have them testify to, because now I can check it off that I know everybody seems to agree that she was at least in that vicinity at that time in the driver's seat. Now, I know they haven't confirmed it's her, but I assume we're getting there too, and they need to do that. Holly said, if everyone is saying it just started snowing at the supposed time Karen killed John, how is it that there is blood on over 4 inches of snow? I don't know. None of that stuff really makes sense to me at this point. None of it really makes sense to me at this point. All right, let's hear redirect.
So, Ms. Maxon, during the time that you were asked about not sort of focusing on the SUV in front of you, fair to say that you would have seen a 6-foot man walking away from that car going towards the house?
Correct.
Okay.
So that was their shot at the defense's theory. You would have seen him get out of the car and walk to the house. Sure, except for the fact that I think they all testified that that car was parked there when they got to 34 Fairview. So how much time was it parked there? I don't know. That was why I think they wanted those details of, we saw this car pull in. Well, the driver doesn't remember that, and we're about to get to his testimony. So could Karen Reed have parked and John O'Keefe walked in? Now we're talking about 10 seconds of difference when, we're giving some grace, at least I am, when I hear the Albert say, I left at 12:10, it was actually 12:14, no big deal. Well, 4 minutes is a lot different than the time it takes for somebody to walk from the passenger seat to inside the house.
You were in a vantage point where you would have seen that had that occurred, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't see that?
I did not.
Okay. Nothing further on.
All right. So you are all set, Ms. Maxon.
Okay, thank you.
I believe
When
it
we
was
get
starting.
to Ricky D'Antano, the driver of the Nagel truck, around midnight, they left to pick up Julie. Doesn't recall any vehicle turning in. He does recall the SUV parked 10 or 20 yards in front of him. Doesn't remember it moving. No damage. Didn't see the lights on in the vehicle. I don't think that's what he said. He thinks they talked through the windows. Then there was the difference between Ryan Nagel thought he opened the door, but the ex-girlfriend we just heard from and Ricky both think they talked through the window. So another little discrepancy there. I'm not sure how important it is. He didn't see the vehicle move or anyone get out of it. Then on cross, he never saw the SUV hit anyone, didn't hear anything, didn't interview with the police. until it was with someone from other than the defense or the Commonwealth. And okay, and then I wanted to play this part because I think I might have the wrong timestamp down here, so I started to feel like the defense did kind of try to throw out that someone else, not the prosecution or the defense, came and spoke to you about it, and it was objected to this time, and they had an immediate sidebar. And my guess is the judge instructed them on in some sort of way to say, don't push it with the Fed stuff.
And you were first asked about your memory about what was clearly over a year after January 29th. I suppose February, March, think about 16 months after the events that you were asked to describe, right?
Correct.
And then it was only after you talked to someone else, again, not the prosecution or the defense.
Objection, Your Honor.
Christina, why don't I see it sidebar just so we don't keep getting into it?
So again, I do think they ramped it up just a little bit. They've been asking everybody those kinds of questions, and it hasn't been a problem. But now that Feds has been dropped, is the judge going to rein that in a little bit more? That's something to keep an eye and an ear on as we watch this together. September 2nd, 2023 is the first time any state police approached him, which is just crazy. There was nothing unusual about how the car was parked. Didn't look like a drunk driver, basically. Didn't see a Jeep with a snowplow. No broken taillights. Didn't see John O'Keefe in the yard, et cetera, et cetera. Then we get to Allison McCabe, Jen and Matt, I think McCabe's daughter, cousin of the Alberts, basically in the Albert family. I think she's like 20 years old, so she's young. At the time, she was young, 17, 18 years old. She and Colin Albert are best friends, basically. They're not technically cousins, but close enough. She is the one. This is what I've been waiting for. Who picked him up? She is the one that picked him up. The Reed SUV was not there when she picked him up at 12:10 exactly, and she knows that. We'll get to how later. She talked to the trooper in August of 2023. She gave them the text messages with Colin and the pictures. So this is what's wild to me. Nobody talked to her until August of 2023. And let's say the Commonwealth's theory was always that Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe and killed him at 12:45. Do you think somebody that was there at 12:10 would have been important? At least to frame in our timeline and what happened if we really think that this was a murder. And everybody that's acting, on the Albert side is like, well, Colin wasn't there. He just wasn't there. We all knew he wasn't there. We knew it was irrelevant. She said it was irrelevant. And so nobody understood why any of them would ever have to talk to the police. If you want to go with that, it's going to depend on how a jury looks at it. Is a jury going to side-eye that is the real question. When she saw Colin, he was acting normal, no injuries. She dropped him off. She waited for him to get inside. That was it. So now is a moment that I thought was good for the Commonwealth with her. Okay, a couple good moments, couple bad moments with her on the stand. But I kind of was saying, I think there's an argument that you switch your phones, a lot of the stuff transfers. Like a lot of my stuff transfers. And you can save text messages. You can pick what is backed up to SoundCloud or what transfers, etc. It might not all be on your new physical phone, but I think you can save just about everything on a new phone that was on an old phone. And I even made in my notes, if I'm Yannetti, be careful about going at it with the technicalities of a cell phone with a 20-year-old, but he's not afraid. He does it, and he does it pretty well later. But first, let's hear her talk on direct about things transferring to her new phone.
As far as your phone, what kind of phone did you have at that time?
I believe an iPhone 14 Pro Max, maybe.
And I should have been more specific as far as the time, but the iPhone you're talking about, Pro Max, was that in January of 2022
Oh, I'm sorry.
or August of 2020?
That was in August.
And between January of 2022 and August of 2023, did you have the same phone throughout that time period?
I'm not sure. I believe I upgraded. Yeah.
And when you upgraded your phone, what, if any, data sort of carried over from the old phone to the new phone?
Everything.
So as far as chats or text messages or phone contacts, things like that, all of that transferred from one phone to the new phone?
Correct.
And
I think that's good evidence for the Commonwealth, for multiple witnesses that
Yes.
rehomed their phone. Just water in here, Megan.
And so first thing I'm going to show you two-page document. I asked you to take a look at it. and look over.
Okay.
And do you recognize that, man?
Yes.
And what do you recognize that?
This is from my phone, my text messages.
And the second page, what is that?
Colin's contact information.
Are those screenshots that you took from your phone provided to the troopers in August of 2023?
Yes, yes, yes.
May I approach you now?
Yes.
I'm also seeking to use it as objection that has to be heard.
Okay, come on up. Bring that.
So now they go to sidebar. They argue about whether or not these texts should come in, whether or not they're reliable, things like that. I'm going to save it. We're going to play it when it actually comes out in front of the jury. But I do want to have the discussion we're going to have here about these text messages and kind of what I talked about off the top with whether something's real and fake is going to be really tough to determine. And everybody's going to call everything fake because of technology these days. So we'll see. Sandy said, did you miss where Lally says he's going to blow it as the driver walked in? I did not hear that. It's possible it happened, but I missed that. Summer Golden. It's crossed my mind that John O'Keefe was kind of beat up, kind of obvious with the black eye, etc., but that it was in the basement and not everyone in the house knows. A shoddy investigation equals reasonable doubt, in my opinion. Yeah, this is a theory I think we discussed on either yesterday or the day before's video, that not as many people would have to be in on the cover up if this is what happened. Although a lot of people said he didn't go downstairs. So I don't know. All right. A bunch of people have questions about these text messages. Let's read through them, listen to it, and then we'll get to it.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Gilman, if you could hold down. Now, what's up on the screen, Mr. K? Is that what you have before you as the exhibit?
So go ahead and say the weird things that you see on these text messages, and I'll throw some of them up here. On an iPhone text message, when the date changed from January 20th, 29th, on the screenshots, shouldn't there be a new date stamp? So this is one of the questions I got. So I'll leave this on the screen as we listen, and I'll tell you some of the other ones I've gotten just on my DMs.
Yes,
And looking at, there's a sort of one side as text and one side as blue bubble, is that correct?
yes.
And if you know who is communicating with who as far as the sort of plain text outside of the bar?
Colin and I? Is that what you're asking? Sorry.
What I'm asking is, who's the blue bubble?
Oh, sorry. I'm the blue bubble and he is the gray whitish bubble.
And from sort of the top of what's depicted on the screen, you read the text that you received and the time that you received.
Yes, 11:54, and then I responded at 11:55.
And what did Colin say at 11:50?
You can get me now if easier.
And what did you?
Okay, I am driving people home now.
And what did Colin respond to that, and what time did he respond?
He responded, word, get me after.
And someone could scroll down. And following the getting after, what if any responses you provided?
KK, okay, and here,
And here that you texted, what time does that read on the screenshot?
12:10 a.m.
All right, so here's what Rick is talking about. It goes from 11:55 p.m. to 12:10 a.m., and it doesn't say January 29th or the new day. And you can see here it says February 20th. I had a bunch of people talk to me. It's like, oh, they're best friends, teenage kids at the time, and they didn't text each other for a month. I don't believe that. That's tough. That was like the most damning part of it to me, that something must have been deleted, that they're best friends and they're teenagers and they haven't texted for an entire month. That's wild. If the state and the defense removed certain texts because they were irrelevant, that should have been brought up, because that makes me question the objectivity. David Reese says, I can't understand why screenshots of the text would be admissible. I've seen issues with that as well, but I've also seen it come in at certain times. I also saw people talk about, is it earlier? It might be when Colin's texts are up, there's a comma after the year on the screenshots of his phone, I think. I also looked back at mine, and a lot of people did, and a lot of people were sending me screenshots of their phone. This couldn't have been on one line. I texted it out, stuff like that. A bunch of people sending me stuff like that they've done their own independent research. We're all experts, so I went and did some of my own. Mine, the year doesn't show up. I don't know if it's a new iPhone or new update, and the year used to show up. Mine, the date doesn't change every day that it crosses over from 11:55 p.m. to 12 a.m. So there's a lot of differences, and that's why it's hard to kind of push through this stuff and get the answers without an expert. So I'm hoping that the defense is going to call some kind of cell phone expert or iPhone expert to explain this is not what it would look like if they're going to attack the credibility of this. Because as it sits, I don't know. I can kind of see it both ways. The defense does a pretty good cross to talk about editing it, but will a jury believe that? Because I have seen you guys in the chat, when certain defendants make this argument, they're like, yeah, right. Of course, the computer program is false or is edited. And guess what? The Commonwealth is about to make kind of a similar argument out of two sides of their mouth when they right now are saying, look at how great this objective evidence is. This is all true. But when we get to the Life 360, well, that's not working properly. And they could be right. But it just sounds funny to hear them argue out of both sides when you have a situation dealing with technology that comes up.
Following again, after, what if any responses you provided?
KK. Okay. And here,
And here that you texted, what time was that read on screenshot?
12:10 a.m.
And so what, if anything, Colin responds to the your text?
He responded at the same time saying, okay.
Somebody can take it. May I approach this retreat, John?
Yes.
So the next two pages, two separate pages, contain photographs, is that correct?
Yes.
And you recognize what's depicted in those photographs that I've just placed before you?
Yes.
What do you recognize those?
It's Colin.
So they just show pictures of Colin and Nicole Albert, no injuries to his hands, face, arms, things like that. I've seen pictures circulating with hand injuries on his knuckles. I'm not going to comment on those. They haven't come in as evidence. I don't know when they were authenticated or anything like that. On cross-examination, they get out that Colin is one of her best friends. And then we get into them trying to hammer away at this text exchange.
For a copy of that screenshot through the whole month of February, correct?
Correct.
In fact, all of 2022, no investigator ever approached you to say, can I have a copy of that screenshot, correct?
Correct.
And in addition to that,
So I look back, Margaret, and sometimes it happens on mine and sometimes it doesn't. I have no idea why. I'm not saying these texts are authentic. I'm just saying I did scroll through my phone and I did see that. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of consistency, but mine for sure doesn't have years. I scrolled all the way back to some text from last year and it doesn't have years. Now, maybe if you go back 2 years, it does. I don't know, but it is wild to think how this should be easy to prove or disprove. But let's listen to how Yannetti breaks it down on Cross.
you never called an investigator to say, hey, I have a copy of a screenshot of a text message conversation that I had with Colin L, correct?
No, it wouldn't have been relevant at that time,
Okay.
I believe, because Colin was not at the house and wasn't introduced as being there until later.
Like what? Like she says that the Commonwealth brings it out again. And I'm like, Colin wasn't introduced as being there until later. I get what she's trying to say. She's trying to say he wasn't there. He wasn't thrown into this vortex. You guys threw him into this vortex. You created this mess and it's all fake. But what it also kind of sounded like, if I'm thinking about it from the other side, is they tried to hide the fact that he was there and the truth didn't come out until later that he was even at the house. So just kind of interesting phraseology there. Yes, Casey, I think we're going to see that more on the next one because I do remember seeing that too. It must have been when they put it on Colin's text that there was an extra comma. And then Kathy, yeah, I hope, I don't know because I have no idea. Cam Marshall said only indispensable facts matter. And so far after nearly 40 witnesses, I'm not hearing anywhere near enough to even consider a conviction. Okay. Indisputable. So indisputable facts. So no, I mean, I agree. Indisputable facts are always best, but sometimes a jury does have to weigh credibility and inconsistencies and try to determine what the truth is and what reality is. Sometimes they do have to do that.
So your testimony today is that at no time in the year 2022 did you consider it relevant at all that you had this screenshot of this text conversation, correct?
Correct.
Leaving that screenshot aside, actually, before I leave that topic, you didn't turn over that screenshot of a text message until sometime during the summer of 2023, correct?
Correct.
About a year and a half or more after January 29th of 2022, correct?
Yes, when I was asked.
And by that time, the summer of 2023, you had already switched phones, correct?
Yes, I believe.
In other words, the iPhone that you had on January 29th of 2022, you no longer have possession of that physical phone, correct?
Correct.
You had a new iPhone, correct?
Correct.
And you say that you transferred over the data from the old phone to the new phone, correct?
Correct.
When did you take that screenshot that was displayed to the jury today?
I don't remember.
Was it before or after you got rid of your old phone?
I don't remember.
So we don't know if that screenshot was from your phone that you got in December of 2022 or if it was from the phone that you had back in January of 2022, correct?
Correct.
That phone that you got in December of 2022, it's now May of 2024. Do you still have that same phone?
The phone, my old phone? Is that?
No, my question was, and again, I'm not trying to trick you in any way here. The phone that you got in December of 2022, the new phone at that time, is that the phone, your current phone?
Correct.
Now, before you got rid of the old phone and got the new one, did any law enforcement official prior to that December of 2022 time period or investigator from this case ever ask to examine your physical phone itself?
No.
Did they?
So nobody even asked to look in her phone. Jonathan said, why are these texts accepted if it is not established who requested them? I'm not sure what you mean by who requested them. Is there a possibility these kids saw nothing and the body was placed outside after these events occurred? Sure. I mean, I'll leave that open. I definitely don't feel like one factual scenario has been proven to me. So I guess I can say sure is something possible at this point, right? Lauren said mine from 2022 do have the COMAF 22, and I didn't scroll back that far. That's why it's way outside of my zone or things that I like to do to say these texts are fake or to confirm these texts are real. I have no idea. If a court of law is going to allow them to come in, at least she thinks they passed the muster to be reliable to put in front of a jury. And she's going to let the defense attack him on cross like he's doing. And if the jury finds them to not be legitimate or reliable, they can do that as well. I'm not a cell phone expert. I don't know. I hope there will be one that comes out and explains all this. Margaret said, take out year. Each new day will say today, yesterday, Thursday. The further you go back, it then shows years and dates. It's going to be easy to prove. Yeah, I noticed this too. It was kind of always different. Yeah, it was today, yesterday, then it was a day of the week, and then it was the month, and then it was not the year, and then somebody saying it is the year eventually. Brooklyn, is this case juicier than most, or is just me? It is not just you. It absolutely is juicier than most. Consistent Insomniac said, Peter, how can this judge force this case forward? I don't understand how this can happen if the prosecutors are obviously not ready. Please explain. So she gives them enough time. If they agree on a trial date, sometimes lawyers just always assume a case is going to get continued. And if the judge says no, she can say no. And that's what happened here. I was shocked. It's the first time I've ever been wrong in my own cases in my own life or covering cases on YouTube about a case getting continued. I thought for sure this case was going to get continued, and it didn't. I do not know the answer to this, except that it is within a judge's discretion technically, and they probably all agreed at some point to this trial date. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit.
You were 12 or 13 years old.
Correct.
On text messages, correct?
Correct.
And you know that there's a lot of tools open to you to comment on text messages, correct?
Correct.
You can reply to a text using an icon or an emoji, right? To like or dislike something that somebody else said.
Correct.
You can laugh at it. You can love it. You can like it, correct?
Objection.
Right?
Correct.
And they make it pretty easy, right? All you need to do is put your finger or your thumb on a specific message and hold it down, and options appear, correct?
Correct.
And that's where you get the thumbs up, the thumbs down, the haha, exclamation points, question mark, etc.
Correct.
And you also have other options, which is down the bottom. There's a kind of a curved arrow where if you click on that, you can forward the message or reply to a specific message, correct?
Correct.
And on the left, there's a trash can, right?
Correct.
And what happens when you click on the trash can?
It will delete the message from your phone.
And it's your testimony that with regard to the screenshot that you saw, there are no deleted messages in that conversation, correct?
Yes.
However, you would agree, as you've already testified, that if a message had been deleted from a screenshot, we'd never know, right?
True.
And she's right. I get people are going to, say they don't like her or whatever. She's like, yeah, I can't sit here and prove to you that it's real, but nothing was deleted on there. And that's what she's going to go with. Damien said, why does the judge immediately and constantly sustain objections from Lally without further questions? So she's not letting them make any speaking objections. She's not even letting them give a reason. So that's going both ways. And we've just heard her overrule a couple and a couple important ones, like, did you see the car hit the body? And getting into some of these text messages, she's allowing her to answer someone. So it's not always sustaining objections from Lally. She does sustain plenty of them, though. Yeah, Liz A, there's a lot of interesting coincidences in this case.
You're also familiar with the apps that are on iPhones, correct?
Correct.
You have a number of apps on your iPhone, right?
Correct.
There are maybe 12 or 15, 12 or 15 maybe on your home screen, right?
Correct.
And if you swipe to the left, you get another new population of 12 or 15.
Correct.
Not bad for an old guy. And you you use apps like Instagram,
Correct.
Snapchat is a popular app,
Correct.
and probably to your detriment, but Life 360,
Correct.
all right, that's been an app in the McCabe family for a number of years, right?
Correct. Yes.
And
So here we go. He got into that you can manipulate text, you can manipulate times, things like that. But now we're going to get into Life 360. So they want us to believe like, oh yeah, all those texts, legitimate, definitely didn't fake them, definitely didn't edit them, definitely didn't delete stuff. But now let's get into another app called Life 360 and see if we can learn anything about this case from that app.
and it's in your family anyway, and probably a lot of families, it's mainly used for the parents to keep track of their kids, right?
Correct.
And in order for Life 360 to work, you have to have your location services on, and somebody else has to have the app in the family, correct? Connected to you?
Correct.
And with regard to, just going back to the messages for a minute, do you know the difference between an iMessage and a text message?
Yes, I believe one's blue and one's green.
Oh, the screenshots that we saw of your text conversation that you say that you had with Colin Albert, you were in blue, right?
Correct.
That means that Colin Albert also had an iPhone at the time, correct?
Correct.
No,
Now-
crazy.
With regard to
Definitely not normal.
the timestamp on those messages, the conversation about I'm here, I believe you said it gave the time 12:10 a.m., correct?
Correct.
Are you aware how easy it is to change that time?
No.
Are you aware that all you need to do is go from settings to general, and then there's a date and time that you can alter?
Objection.
Let me know in the chat real quick, because maybe I'm older than I think. She's like 20, I think. I'm 36. Yanetti's obviously older than me. I don't know how old. Did you guys all know it was that easy to change the time? Because I did not know that. And I guess the only reason you would want to do that would be to screenshot it. And that's the problem with them not being able to get the metadata, because I guess if you had the metadata, you could show that they edited the time, which is why screenshots are less reliable than the actual text messages that are done from a data download. But yeah, let me know. Did you guys all know that you could change the times? I didn't even know you could do that. I thought that was like rock solid. Boom, we have the time. Can't fake that. I had no idea. The chat's a little bit split, 50-50, but I thought that was like, boom. But I guess I'm wrong, which is also why I'm not a cell phone expert. We hire people to do stuff like that.
Are you aware of that?
No, I didn't know that was a thing.
You know that when you set up your iPhone, you have to choose a time zone, correct?
Correct.
And you always choose the New York time zone because that's where Boston is, right?
Correct.
Are you aware that if you go into settings, general, and then date and time, you can change the time zone to wherever you're going?
I guess I didn't. Once I set my phone up, I have no reason to change the time.
See? And in addition to
And it
changing
changes automatically when you go from one time zone to the next. I do know that.
the time zone, you literally can choose any time that you want. You could make 1:45 a.m., 12:10 a.m. in about 3 seconds. Do you know that?
Do you know that? Do you know that?
No.
But if I'm not accusing you of this now, but if you had changed the time on that from a screenshot, we'd have no way of knowing, correct?
I guess.
Because what a screenshot ultimately becomes is like a photo, correct?
Correct.
It's not like you can edit it, right? I mean, the most that you can do is what we saw on the other photo that was displayed, which is kind of crossing out with a magic marker somebody's face or a time, right? That would be how you'd have to alter it, right?
Correct.
Now,
So again, pretty effective. If the jury wants to throw it out, again, they don't have to. It's up to them. It's not indisputable, but it is evidence that they can determine whether or not they're going to rely on. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to get to more of the Life 360 talk.
when you went, okay, and what time do you say that you arrived at home?
I'm not sure. Before around 12:30ish.
With regard to Life 360, would you agree with me that if you go on that app and you're trying to figure out where somebody in your family is, there's and then let's say you want to know somebody's home. There's like a circle that surrounds your home, correct?
Yes.
So once you enter that circle, you know that Life 360 gives an alert that said you arrived at home. Even though you're physically not walking in the door, you're within that circle, and that's the home circle, right?
Yes.
On January 29th of 2022, at 12:04 and 53 seconds, you arrived within that home circle, correct?
Correct.
And then at 12:06 and 55 seconds on January 29th, you left that home circle, correct?
Correct.
And then on January 29th of 2022, at 12:23 and 14 seconds, you completed a 7-mile drive where your top speed was 42 miles an hour. Does that make sense?
Correct.
So they're about to get into a bunch of Life 360 data. That certainly doesn't sound like she picked somebody up at 12:10, dropped them off, and went home and didn't do anything else that night. So just track with them, listen to it. I don't know what it proves. I don't know where it perfectly fits into the defense's theory of the case, but oh boy, does it sound like she was driving all over the place that night past 12 o'clock.
And then you left home on January 29th of 2022 at 12:23 and 14 seconds as well. And what that probably means, reading between the lines, is that you entered that home circle, but then you didn't go home. You went through the home circle and completed a 7-mile drive somewhere, right?
I guess I thought I went home.
Objection, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear your answer.
I believe I went home.
Okay.
I was completing my drive at my house.
All right, but at 12:26 a.m. on January 29th, you left home again, right?
Objection, Your Honor.
Did you leave home?
I don't know. I don't remember.
All right. And at 12:26 a.m. and 12 seconds, you arrived at the Canton High School, correct?
No.
On January 29th of 2022, at 12:26 and 55 seconds, you completed a 1-mile drive where your top speed was 43 miles per hour, right?
I don't believe so.
And then,
So there are certain things about Life 360 that are not perfect. Like location sometimes is a little bit off. Timing sometimes can be a little bit off. They're going to do a decent job throwing something at the jury for them to consider on redirect. Because again, you got to realize the jury is lay people. I know everybody that comments on these videos, and it's a really respectful chat here. So I really appreciate that always. Twitter, sometimes not as respectful. But some people are like, no way, that could never happen, or it's perfectly accurate, or it's never accurate, or these texts are absolutely edited. I know because, I'm this or whatever. I like to leave room for grace. I like to leave room for being wrong. I like to leave room for things not being perfect, for an it depends scenario. And you put all that together and it's like, okay, but this has her out driving until 1:30 in the morning, clocking her speeds at, over 40 miles an hour, driving 5, 6, 7 miles at a time. That's more than just a rounding error or it pinging off the wrong spot to me. I don't know what it proves yet, but I do think there's something here. B&B, this would be wild to me if this was true. But it kind of goes with the investigation, right?
at 12:26 and 55 seconds on January 29th, you left Canton High School and arrived at home on January 29th of 2022 at 12:29 and 28 seconds, correct?
I do not know.
And then after arriving home again on January 29th of 2022 at 12:29 and 29 seconds, you completed a 12-mile drive on January 29th of 2022 at 12:31 and 22 seconds, did you not?
No.
And then you left home on January 29th of 2022 at 1:08 and 15 seconds, right?
I don't believe so.
And ultimately, you went through the home bubble and the Canton High School bubble, and you arrived at Canton High School on January 29th of 2022 at 1:28 in the morning and 8 seconds.
And I see what you're referring to.
Sure.
To me, she strikes me as smart.
Yes.
Moves like that make me think she's pretty smart.
If you would read it silently to yourself.
So she shows it to them. And let's
Did that
remember,
work?
okay, because what the lawyers ask, the questions are not evidence. So all this stuff he's reading right now is not in evidence. So I don't know if they're going to get to enter it later. I don't know if they're going to have somebody authenticate it, but none of that stuff where she was or what the Life 360 said is in evidence because she said no to like all of it. Now, when she said okay, which she did to some of it, maybe they could argue that came in. But that's always interesting and something we have to remember when the defense is making arguments in closing.
Sorry. May I approach?
Yes.
Did that help refresh your memory on where you were that night?
No.
Do you still dispute you went straight home and didn't leave there?
Objection.
Sustained.
And finally, I just asked you about arriving at Canton High School on January 29th, 2022 at 1:28 and 8 seconds. You arrived at home, within that home bubble, on January 29th of 2022 at 1:30 in the morning and 26 seconds, correct?
What time did it say I arrived at high school?
1:30 in the morning and 26 seconds.
And what time did it say I arrived at high school?
The high school was 1:28 and 8 seconds.
It wouldn't have taken me 2 minutes to go from the high school to my house. I'm confused.
With regard to the high school was also one of the bubbles, one of the
She's smart. She's listening. She's paying attention and she's picking her arguments. So I definitely think she's a smart witness.
areas where you could be, right, on Life 360?
No.
Yes.
So we're going to stop it there. That's most of what he got out, which was interesting. And we're about to get to the redirect, which was one of the most interesting parts of the entire trial. So before we get there, hit that like button. We've got 12,000 people in the chat, which is so cool. We haven't had a chat this big for this trial, I don't think yet. So let's get it to 12,000 likes. We got the last video to 10,000 likes, hit the goal. Let's get this one to 12,000 likes. You guys are the best. This is incredibly interesting. I mean, this is literally a made for TV trial. So I get why all you guys are interested. I'm trying to stay as focused as I can. So many people are sending me so many different things. I'm not ignoring you, but I'm not reading any of the motions. I'm not watching any of the hearings. I'm trying to be focused on what the jury is watching and looking at, how the lawyers are arguing it, how the judge is making her decisions, and why. Because of that limited knowledge of the other stuff, sometimes it's hard from some of the pretrial decisions the judge has made. Some of that's going to come into play now. But go ahead and hit that like button and make sure you subscribe if you haven't already before we get to probably the most interesting 5 minutes of testimony today. Dylan, the juries do not get transcripts of the testimony. Sometimes they can get a read back in certain jurisdictions, but generally speaking, they've got to rely on their memory and their notes. Vicky with a Y, would Cellbrex's records have accurate times? Potentially, but nobody downloaded her phone, and she rehomed that phone prior to talking to police, and then police still never asked for them to download that phone. Brooklyn Basement, do lawyers have to be so redundant with each new witness regarding their background, or is that a choice? Is there a downside to just getting to business? Couple reasons why. I'll try to answer this as quickly as I can. If it's an expert, sometimes you have to lay the foundation of their expertise if the other side is not going to allow them or agree that they're an expert. Number two, sometimes if you want to talk about their background, if it's really great, if they're a military guy or whatever, where the jury may like them more, you want to get into that. Number three, sometimes if you feel like you need their background to give context to their testimony, you'll get into it. Other times lawyers do it unnecessarily because they're so used to doing things the same way that they don't want to venture outside and cut to the chase. I like to do that on a lot of witnesses, but only when it's necessary. If the background adds to the context, you usually do need to go into the background, even sometimes if it's laborious. Matrix. During the hearings, I thought the judge ruled that the IA investigation couldn't be brought up at all, but the feds being involved would have had to develop organically, if I remember her words. Is that completely wrong? I don't remember what the actual ruling was. She definitely wants to keep it out, but she's allowing them to talk about it, especially to impeach with prior statements that were made in the federal grand jury so that they have those prior statements. So she's not really handcuffing the defense as much as it sounded like originally people thought she was going to do. Marty, how much would John O'Keefe's family know about the defense's theory before the trial started, do you think? Probably not much at all. I think there's some indication that they're not really speaking. Dina, why do you think Jen McCabe asked Julie for the text message between her and Ryan that night timeline? It certainly seemed like she was trying to get timelines and stories straight. That's what it seemed like. Is rehome the new pledge, Brian? That's a great callback. That is a great callback right there. P-Hop, Peter, are you drinking out of a pink sterile evidence cup? It's definitely not sterile. It's got my saliva all over it at this point. All right, I see some people quoting things that are coming. Leah, Peter, would her changing the time on her phone, setting it back the amount of minutes for the text, wouldn't that interfere with Life 360? Honestly, I have no clue. I'd be totally guessing. I'm not an expert on that stuff. But let's get to it now. Okay, everybody's had a chance to like the video, right? Let's get to this redirect where it gets wild.
From January 28th and the 29th with Colin.
No.
And with reference to changing times or time zones or anything on text messages, before Mr. Yannetti asked you any of those questions, were you aware of any of those things as things that you could do with your phone?
No.
With regard to Life 360, what any knowledge do you have as far as the accuracy of sort of the timestamps that are contained within that app?
Well, I'm not sure, but on the photo he showed me, it says like turn Wi-Fi on. So that like remind Allie to turn Wi-Fi on. So that could have affected the accuracy.
So she saw in the documents he gave her and didn't try to push it while he was there, but on redirect that it said turn Wi-Fi on. And I mean, I think to a layperson, that makes sense that it's not as accurate without Wi-Fi. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if the jury knows if that's true or not, but that was a very smart point by her as to a reason it might not be that accurate.
And that was on literally every single one of the alerts that was on that page that you showed you?
Every single one.
Now, Canton High School, do you know what street that's on?
Washington Street, I believe.
And
Yeah.
about how far a ride is it from Canton High School to your house?
7-8 minutes. 10, I'm not sure.
You were in the bubble, in high school at 1:28 in the morning. Could you have possibly been in the bubble of your home at 1:30 in the morning?
No,
Unless you were going 90 miles an hour in a snowstorm?
no,
Now, you were asked some questions about that time frame of August of 2023 when you were asked and you turned over some screenshots to troopers from the state police, right?
correct.
So a lot of this doesn't make sense. Why did she screenshot it in the first place? Who is she sending it to? Things like that. But we're about to get into the harassment. Okay. And this was an incredibly interesting point. I'm going to answer your questions. I'm going to give you my thoughts, but I want to make sure you all were ready for this to come through. And not only does she say harassment, but listen to the Freudian slip that I mentioned off the top as well that came out.
You were asked about previous times, indicating that you weren't asked and it wasn't relevant, correct?
Correct.
Now, you know why you were asked in August of 2023 versus any prior time period?
Because Colin Albert wasn't in the house, and it was brought up here that he was.
And brought up where?
By defense.
It was brought up here that he was. Brought up where? By defense. It's like even Lally is confirming that the defense had to frame the time period of who was there, who wasn't. Even if he wasn't there, even if this is all true, which it very well may be, and that he left at 12:10, wouldn't the Commonwealth want to put that on to really frame in the time of when this actually happened, and they can prove it was after 12:10 because that's when Colin left and he didn't see anything, nothing happened to the house while he was there? Why wouldn't they want that information?
And around that time of August 2023?
I believe so, yes.
And with reference to relevancy, is that what you were talking about?
Correct.
And what, if anything else, are you close friends with Colin Albert? Is that correct?
Correct.
What, if anything else, has your family or Colin Albert and his family undergone over the course of the pendency of this case? Okay.
So before we get to this answer, remember what I said about the defense not being able to open the door and use something that's evidence they want to use that's inadmissible? Well, that foundational question that Lally asked is what I've seen and heard other people. And I think people said Emily Baker said this. I'm not going to ascribe it to her. I didn't hear her say it myself. And I know sometimes she gets misquoted, but that's what opened the door. That these screenshots and texts weren't relevant until the harassment. First off, already not true. I've had a second to think about this. So already not true based on her own testimony. Because what she just said is what made them relevant is that the defense brought up that he was at the house. That's what made him relevant, not the harassment. Okay. Maybe the harassment came secondarily to that. Fine. If there is harassment, I know some people saying she wasn't harassed, whatever. I don't really care. Let's assume the harassment is true for this argument. So she's already answered that that's not the reason that they became relevant. Number one. Number two, the defense didn't ask what made them relevant. They asked what took so long. So if she was going to say it, that would have been the answer. So the defense didn't open the door. Lally's opening the door with this line of questioning, in my opinion. And I don't think the harassment is at all relevant in this case. Unless they're going to prove that there was actual harassment, that we know that for a fact. If somebody's been convicted of harassment, I don't know. They could bring that up. But also, if the defendant did not either direct the harassment or ratify it, and they can't prove that, if I go and harass her, okay? If I go and harass her, they can't hold that against the defendant. I don't know the defendant. The defendant didn't ask me to do that. I don't know what's happened in this case, okay? Just so you know, I know there's a lot going on. But I'm just arguing it from a legal perspective. To attribute my actions to the defendant where it's going to hurt her in this trial, and the jury may feel bad for these witnesses that the defendant's pointing the finger at because of something I did, is not appropriate to come in at a situation like this where the defense has not at all stepped through this or opened the door or made it part of the trial. So the fact that this is coming out now really blows my mind. I do not see how this door was opened by anybody but Lally. And I don't think that, I don't know if he opened the door on purpose or what, but I am shocked that the judge let her get into this. And I will tell you, watching this real time for the first time, I felt for her. I don't know her. I don't know the Alberts. I don't know who did what in this case. I don't think the defense has proven their theory. I don't think the Commonwealth has proven their theory. I've said it 50 million times at this point that that's much worse for the Commonwealth than it is for the defense, but I felt bad for her. She's a young kid, 20 years old, being harassed. And trust me, I'm a man, I'm 40. If any of you guys get that reference, let me know who said that in the comments. But people have come at me for this case. I don't really care. I'm just doing what I like to do, talk about cases, but I can imagine that she's probably gotten some stuff. That Colin's probably gotten some stuff in their DMs and people being pretty terrible to them. And whether those people are right or wrong in how they think the outcome of this case should be, I felt bad for her. I shouldn't get that feeling about a witness in a criminal case like this. Some one-off, barely an eyewitness came to pick somebody up at a house should not make me feel bad about the eyewitnesses in this case, or bad for the eyewitnesses in this case. And that the defense directed that harassment. Because that's the feeling I got while she's testifying. And I wanted to throw that out there. SC, what, if any, thoughts on the judge's ruling when Lally asked Allie leading questions about the harassment? The fake cry was almost believable. I'm not going to say it was fake cry. I didn't say it was a fake cry with Kyle Rittenhouse. I don't say Murdoch's a fake cry. I don't know who's crying for real or who's not. That's just my opinion. I don't know the answer to that. Other people asked me this question too. Casey, what was the relevance for when they allowed her to talk about the harassment later on? I guess that's why the text messages came out when they did. That's what everybody's trying to point to. I don't see that as a legitimate reason for this to come out. Trying to see if there was any other questions starred here about that. All right, let's listen to her go into the harassment now.
No, that the door's been open. I'm allowing it.
Now that the door's been opened after Lally asked a question, she's going to allow it.
Over the course of pendency of this case. Objection.
No, that the door's been open. I'm allowing it.
Well, basically harassment.
Harassment by
Bloggers, people online.
and what, if anything?
Not the defendant, not the defense, but bloggers and people online were harassing her.
In relation to Colin Albert being in the house has occurred as far as the harassment that you're talking
Can you rephrase?
about. With reference to what you were talking about as far as the relevancy of Colin Albert being in the house at that time, what, if any, harassment was there in relation to that and in relation to Colin?
Well,
No, go ahead. She can answer.
I mean, Yannetti's really trying to protect this record and being like, Judge, don't do this. I'm going to argue this is reversible error later, but the judge continues to allow it. And again, the relevancy of Colin leaving the house, it's relevant for the time frame of when John O'Keefe died. It's relevant whether the defense brought it up or the Commonwealth brought it up, whether there's harassment or not harassment, it's always relevant. If somebody is at the scene of the crime 20 minutes before the crime occurred and can confirm that the crime did not occur at 12:10, that sounds relevant to me.
Colin wasn't at the house, so he's being harassed for. He was not at the house when John was there, so I drove.
When who was there? When who was there? Was he not at the house? That was jaw-dropping for me. I know people said their jaws dropped when they heard the feds, fine. But what? Colin was not at the house while John was there. I'm going to back it up so you guys can make sure I did not miss that.
He's being harassed for. He was not at the house when John was there, so I drove him home. So people are harassing him, saying he was at the house when it's not true.
When you speak about harassment, what specifically type of harassment are we
Constant phone calls, emails, awful messages.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
And I believe that. I believe that the Alberts got all of that. I don't know it for sure. I don't think the defense missed it, Val. I just think they don't really know right now how far to dig into that. Because the judge is going to look at anything as an open door. Maybe they'll argue it later that even she said John was there at the house, just not at the same time as Colin. That's in evidence now. So they can argue it. They can argue they have evidence that John was there at the house because she said it on redirect.
Focus on this witness, not Colin Albert at this point.
As far as
Literally that.
you and your family, what, if any, type of harassment have you received?
People showing up at our house, people emailing my school, just like a lot of harassment. Can I have a moment, please?
Sure.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have some. Thank you.
And how long a period of time has that persisted for?
Very long time.
Thank you. I have no further.
And how long of a time has that consisted for? A very long time. I just don't see that being part of this trial. I really don't think it should have. Then this is Colin Albert, and he took the stand. I'm going to answer a couple questions before we get to that. Ben, why does Lally ask every witness what brand of beer they were drinking? Is he sponsored by Michelob Ultra or what? I know. Is he trying to say like somebody's going to say Bud Heavy, so they must be much more drunk than the people drinking Mich Ultra? I don't know. Just Chloe said, I just looked at my text conversationally from 1 p.m. to midnight, and they don't have a rollover timestamp. Yeah, that was my experience, but I don't know. Everybody's saying different things. Nikki saw that Jay McCabe was pictured outside Brian H's house. Can upcoming witnesses talk before the trial? They can. They're not really supposed to discuss their testimony, or if they're asked about it by defense, they can talk about it. Margaret, also, Yannetti asked her if she drove by the library on the way to take Colin home, and she said yes on the left. I bet there's cameras. Maybe. I hope so. Maxaw said, holy heck, mic drop. I dropped that. I missed that. I mean, yeah, and that's kind of how I was with the Fed's comment. I had to back it up and listen to it again. So did every juror hear every single one of these things that we're slowing down and picking apart by every detail? And I have 12,500 people here helping me find inconsistencies. The jury doesn't have that. So we got to remember that. And there's people saying, I'm a man, I'm 40. That's Mike Gundy from the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Thank you, Future and Amy, for throwing that out. All right, let me hit some of Colin Albert's testimony here. I'm just going to summarize it. The last 2 minutes, we're already overtime here. What he drank, got to Fairview 10:30, 11 o'clock, reached out to Allie McCabe to pick him up. She came to pick him up at 12:10. She drove him straight home, 5 to 10 minutes. His parents McCabe's parents weren't at 34 Fairview yet, but his parents, when he got home, were there 10 to 20 minutes or 5 to 10 minutes, put them 12:15, 12:20. Based on the cameras at the waterfall, we know that it's impossible that his dad would have been upstairs in bed by 12:15 or 12:20 when he left the waterfall at 12:14. So that timeline ain't adding up. Only saw Karen Reed a couple times. Didn't really know John O'Keefe, was a nice guy. You know, of course, the defense is going to try to create some beef or make it seem like some beef. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I don't know. The Commonwealth obviously downplayed it. We keep hearing about Snapchat, but we haven't seen anything from Snapchat yet. Maybe that'll change. Showed him the text as well. He walked out within 30 seconds of saying okay on the text messages. Didn't see any adults besides Nicole and Brian coming in, which will lead us to there are some people that thought the text messages looked different when they showed them to him. So I figured I'd put them up on the screen. There's that second comma, January 28, 2022, comma after 2022. Other people said their iPhones did it too. Very crazy how there's no consistency here. Ian said, sorry to skip ahead. Is it odd that Colin testified he went outside the door? Nicole claims she got in the front door and passed him. Yes, they said they almost bumped into each other. I noticed that too. That was like a sketch reference. I didn't mean to do that. Yes, what's up, brother? Tuesday. So yeah, one of them, I did think that Nicole said they bumped into each other inside the door. He said they bumped into each other outside the door. Those are one of the discrepancies I would give a little grace on, if not for everything else. Archivius, the messages between her and Colin are fictitious on an iPhone. Timestamps are always aligned. The date and timestamp shows in the middle of the messages. When a new day begins, it will stay there. They're all done. So I got to be honest with you. We've just had some people in the chat that show differences on their iPhone. So I don't know. I don't feel like I know that for a fact at this point. Was the door opened yesterday during the defense's cross of Brian Jr.? You mentioned it. Oh, yes. I'm glad you brought this up. So Brian Jr. mentioned it on his own, not in reference to a direct question. That absolutely does not open the door. And I don't think it did because, or maybe it did. I don't know. Maybe the judge said that because that has happened to me before, like I mentioned, where it's just kind of an offhand comment and it's mentioned. That does not open the door. Usually opening the door is like what happens in Murdoch, where they ask questions, they go for a theory, and the prosecution has to be able to respond to give it context. Now, we might not have agreed with what happened in Murdoch, but at least the judge waited, gave them a warning. When they still went forward, he's like, nope, the door's open now. Go for it. Sandy, she said John was at the house, not in the house. At the house, could be in the yard. We know he was there. I haven't heard anybody put him there yet besides her, right? Somebody put a male in the front seat of a dark SUV, but we'll see. Efaz, when you and your father read letters, he said, prosecution not interviewing a key witness would be a federal issue. Do these late ones count? When you and your father read the letters, he said prosecution not interviewing a key witness would be a federal issue. Do these late ones count? I'm not positive what you're asking. I'm sorry, Ifaz. Azam, today is Teacher's Day here. I want to celebrate you too, Peter. You're like a teacher to me. I learned a lot and I'm still learning. I appreciate you so much. Thank you, Azam. I appreciate you too. I appreciate Kelly and everybody who gifted memberships and all the new members today. Whew, this was fast and furious so much, but we went overtime again because no day bell. We will be hitting day bell again tomorrow. Half day in this case. Cross of Colin Albert coming up. This is who a lot of people tell me the defense is pointing the finger at as a third-party culprit. So I assume it's going to come out fireworks with Jackson right off the bat tomorrow. I don't know if Lally was drinking today. He's probably drinking tonight. Maybe every night. I don't know. Maybe, what did he say? 4 to 8 beers is normal on the weekend, one of the witnesses said. So thank you guys so much for joining me, for all your questions and all your comments. Please make sure you hit that like button before you leave and subscribe to our page. 40% of the people that watch don't subscribe. It's one click. It's free. It'd be cool if you did. I'd love to have you in for this case and all future videos. Hit that reminder bell as well so you know when any new videos are coming out. All right. That's all I got. Until next time, I am out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.